And that brings us to our final segment today, Alyssa, a segment we do every once in a while called Stop It.
So ominous. Oh my.
It's because we feel strongly about the things that we want people to stop doing. And today, what I want to ask bosses to stop doing is saying, I'm just direct. So this is a pattern. Having traveled the country and worked with leaders of all stripes in a variety of environments, when you start to have the same conversations over and over again, you start to notice. And one of the things that I've noticed is over and over again, I will be pulled aside by a leader who will say, sometimes people don't seem to be able to get me. Or sometimes people feel like I'm too harsh and I'm just direct. And
Total cop out.
well, it's an interesting conversation, right? Because you have people who are acknowledging that maybe their style isn't working for them and then immediately moving into a defense of it, right?
Yep.
I am just direct. When I hear that phrase, I often have encountered someone who hasn't yet done the work to think about how they can be honest in a way that preserves other people's dignity.
Yep.
And honesty without finesse is just like my 8-year-old son. Right? Who just, that's stupid.
No filter. Yep.
Right. Yeah. What about you? Have you encountered the direct professional who defends their style by simply saying, I'm just direct?
Absolutely. And well, the phrase that comes to my mind is, how you ask what people's managerial or leadership style is.
Yes.
And when you're asking, I get this a lot whenever you're in a panel of people, right? And they say, one of them says, well, you always know where you stand. That is total code speak for
Yes, it is.
they gonna cut you down with their words every single time they get an opportunity. And they're gonna be direct. And that's how
Mm-hmm.
it's just gonna be, because they're gonna get the pass because, quote, I'm direct. No. Just like you say, I call a total cop out on them not actually doing the work.
And
The
there's all
work
these
that is
other
required.
Yes, and there's all these other phrases that live in and around that defense. People will say things like, well, I just call it like it is, or I call a spade, or, you know what, I don't have time for all that touchy-feely, empathetic nonsense, right?
Yep.
It's this whole kind of, the work we do here is just too important, and if you don't have a thick enough skin, well, then
Yep.
by golly, that you're the problem, not me.
Yep.
So what is some of the work? So leaders, it is completely okay if you are the kind of boss who, when you open your mouth, what tumbles out is total honesty. What's not okay is if you notice that total honesty is negatively impacting other people's character or dignity or self-esteem. That's not okay. The most successful bosses are those who are emotionally intelligent and who think about the packaging. So what is some of the work that bosses need to do to translate what might be callous honesty into more thoughtful dialogue?
Dude, more creepiness. I literally, before you spoke again, wrote down emotional intelligence. And then you came out with the words, and I was like, what is going on? The other thing that I wrote down of what the work means is, for me, what I coach leaders with is this values based perspective. So being able to articulate and understand your own value system and how you show up in the workplace, and how that acts as a lens to how other people experience you and you experience other people. So that is part of doing the work to me. But for sure, emotional intelligence. So if you are have suffered the plight of I just am direct, and you're listening to this podcast, this is your message. Stop what you're doing after this podcast. Your next thing is to start looking up emotional intelligence, values-based leadership. Get yourself some tools so you can do the work, because you're better than that.
And I love that you brought up this idea of how do other people experience it? Because when we talk about directness, we get into this whole debate about intent versus impact.
Right.
You may defend yourself as a boss and say, well, I'm just direct. But what other people experience is my boss is condescending, or my boss is annoyed with me, or he or she is mean. My boss is mean. And if we go back to the conversation we had at the top of the show and we identify the conditions that people need to experience in the workplace to be at their best every day, believing that my boss cares about me as a person, that he or she treats me with dignity and respect, these are all foundational, like bottom of the human development pyramid stuff that we need to experience in any environment in order to thrive in that environment. And so your intent might be to tell the truth and be honest, but the impact is that your style is experienced as abrasive, and it's creating obstacles for you to develop the authentic relationships and have the kind of influence that you probably want to have as a leader. And so we got to think about the packaging. One of the most common sets of questions that leaders are often asked to consider in their communication is the set of questions: is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And most folks who will say, I'm just direct, will say, yeah, it's true, and yeah, it's necessary, and we got to pause on the second question. And maybe that's the filter, is, okay, here's what I want to say. Is it kind? Am I saying this in such a way where I'm not automatically going to have them be insulted or trigger their defensiveness? And if I can say this in such a way where I'm not triggering defensiveness or insulting them, guess what? There's a much greater likelihood that I'm going to be heard, and then I'm going to affect change, and then I'm going to have influence.
What a beautiful red thread that circled back around in this episode. So many good gems.
And so that's why when it comes to saying, I'm just direct, stop it.